Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour tonight, President Trump's lead lawyer handling the Russia investigation is stepping down. The latest shakeup in a defense team grappling with a possible interview of Mr. Trump by the special counsel. Then the uncertain fate of the Iran nuclear deal. I sit down with former U.S. Secretary of Energy Ernest Moniz to discuss what could happen if the U.S. drops out of the agreement. Then defending Missouri, why the state's public defender system is failing both lawyers and their clients. Plus, we continue our series Inside the World of Junk News. Tonight, how one publisher uses Facebook to build viral, hyper-partisan content.
My goal at one point was to deliver to them what they like. And unfortunately, the reality of that is that people are prone to go for the lowest common denominator.
All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour. The new U.S. Secretary of State says it is time to solve the North Korea nuclear problem once and for all. Mike Pompeo spoke this morning after his ceremonial formal swearing in by Vice President Pence, with President Trump watching at the State Department.
Right now, we have an unprecedented opportunity to change the course of history on the Korean Peninsula. I underscore the word opportunity. We're in the beginning stages of the work, and the outcome is certainly yet unknown. The American people are counting on us to get this right. We are committed to the permanent, verifiable, irreversible dismantling of North Korea's weapons of mass destruction program, and to do so without delay.
Meanwhile, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrived in North Korea for possible talks with its leader, Kim Jong-un. He is expected to press for a larger role for Beijing in the new round of nuclear diplomacy. In Libya, 2 suicide bombers killed at least 14 people at the National Election Commission in Tripoli. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility, saying it was trying to prevent a nationwide vote later this year. Video posted online by Libyan television stations showed smoke rising from the building. The Election Commission said that its electoral database was undamaged. The U.S. has transferred a prisoner out of Guantanamo Bay for the first time under President Trump. Ahmed al-Darbi was sent to a rehabilitation program in his native Saudi Arabia. He pleaded guilty in a 2002 attack on a French oil tanker. 40 detainees are left now at Guantanamo. Protesters were out in full force across Armenia today after Parliament rejected the opposition leader serving as prime minister. His supporters blocked major roads and ministry buildings in a national strike. This on the heels of weeks of protests against corruption. Later, the opposition leader called off the protests after the ruling party said that Parliament will vote again next Tuesday. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is under fire after suggesting that European Jews have brought persecution on themselves. In a Monday speech, Abbas said hatred of Jews was, quote, not because of their religion, it was because of their role in usury and banks. Today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Abbas a Holocaust denier, and his foreign ministry joined in.
What we have heard from Mr. Abbas is a series of anti-Semitic accusations of an ugly nature. Mr. Abbas accuses actually the Jewish people for being responsible for its own tragedy. Those are things that we cannot accept.
The U.S., the UN, and the European Union offered their own criticism. Abbas' spokesman did not decline comment. The Palestinian leader has previously questioned how many Jews died in the Holocaust. Back in this country, the state of Iowa may implement the nation's strictest abortion law. Overnight, the Republican majority legislature approved a ban on abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected. That is around 6 weeks, and often before a woman knows she is pregnant. Republican Governor Kim Reynolds opposes abortion, but has not said whether she will sign the measure. In Philadelphia, 2 black men arrested in a Starbucks last month have settled with the city for $1 each. City officials also promised $200,000 for an entrepreneur's program in high schools. Images of Rashon Nelson and Dante Robinson being led away in handcuffs sparked a renewed debate over racial profiling. Starbucks said that it has reached a separate settlement with the men. The British data firm embroiled in the Facebook privacy scandal is shutting down. Cambridge Analytica declared bankruptcy today. It said it has been unfairly vilified for collecting Facebook user information to build voter profiles. A British lawmaker warned the company not to delete its data history as investigations are continuing. The Federal Reserve Board announced today that it is leaving a benchmark interest rate unchanged, but it said again that further increases are expected. On Wall Street, the news contributed to a late-day sell-off. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 174 points to close below 23,925. The Nasdaq fell 29 points, and the S&P 500 slipped 19. And the Boy Scouts are changing their name to Scouts BSA because starting next year, they are also accepting girls. Today's announcement said the parent organization will remain the Boy Scouts of America. Cub Scouts for younger children will still be known as Cub Scouts. Still to come on the NewsHour, a former energy secretary on what could happen if the U.S. exits the Iran nuclear deal. Missouri public defenders overwhelmed with clients now in a catch-22, and much more. President Trump today tapped a veteran Washington attorney to join his legal team. Emmett Flood, who represented President Bill Clinton during his impeachment proceedings, will replace Ty Cobb as the lead White House lawyer in the special counsel investigation. Here to walk us through the latest developments is Robert Costa, reporter of the Washington Post, anchor of Washington Post, and reporter of Washington Week, and reporter for the Washington Post. Bob Costa, I'll get it right eventually.
I'm wearing many hats. Okay.
Yes, you are. So why is this happening? Why is Ty Cobb leaving?
It comes down to President Trump. This is a major shift, Judy, in the president's legal strategy. He wants to be more combative, talking to White House advisors tonight. He wants to have a team around him that counters Robert Mueller and the special counsel investigation. That moves away from Ty Cobb and his strategy of cooperation. Now with Rudy Giuliani, the former New York mayor, in there, Emmett Flood, a veteran lawyer known for taking a tough line on impeachment proceedings and federal investigations, that just shows you where the president wants to go.
So there's been a fair amount of shuffling. I think I've lost count of how many attorneys have come and gone on the president's various legal teams. Does this reflect a change or a different moment in this investigation? Because up until now, it seemed the president was content to follow this cooperation strategy, but something changed.
Something did change. My colleagues and I reported yesterday that in early March, Mueller threatened a subpoena to President Trump if he decided to decline a voluntary interview. And ever since then, you've had the raid of Michael Cohen, the president's longtime personal lawyer, and that's really pushed the president away from cooperating with Robert Mueller. And now he has a big decision to make. Will he sit for that interview or not? And today I talked to Giuliani at length, and he says if the president does sit, and that's a big if, it would only be for 2 or 3 hours max, and it would be about a narrow set of questions. So you see a lot of conditions being negotiated through the press and privately.
So you're right, Robert, there's been a lot of reporting about to what extent the Mueller team has telegraphed to the president's lawyers or told them what he wants from them, what questions he will ask or not. Do we now have a good sense of what Mueller wants to know from the president?
We do. Mueller's team has informed the president's team that they would like to know about key decisions he has made as president, including the firing of former FBI Director James Comey, and what they really want to learn from the president. And why it's so important, the federal investigators say, for the president to sit down before them, is they want to know his intent. Did he have corrupt intent when it came to certain decisions like Comey, to get rid of Comey because of bad management in his eyes as president of the FBI, or was it corrupt intent to rupture the investigations into Russian interference. That's what the special counsel is trying to figure out, and they feel they need the president to speak directly to them about that.
So, so it sounds as if at the White House, especially for the president, the antennae are up and on alert, worried about what this could lead to.
They very much are on alert. Red flags going up. Giuliani, Emmett Flood. Emmett Flood, most Washington lawyers will tell you, is not the kind of lawyer who would encourage a president to sit down for an interview. Ty Cobb was that kind of lawyer. And these kind of disagreements have consumed the president's inner circle for months now. That's what led to the resignation of John Dowd, then the president's lead attorney on Russia, in late March.
And Robert, just quickly, again, what is it about Flood that you think was appealing to the president?
Flood is close to White House counsel Don McGahn. Flood is wary of cooperating too much with federal investigators, of opening up the White House to scrutiny. You have McGahn seeing Flood as someone who understands that it's perhaps the White House's prerogative to exert executive privilege, protect itself in these investigations, at least more than it has been in the eyes of some insiders.
So separately, Robert Costa, you are reporting just in the last few minutes on what is going on with regard to the president getting more and more concerned about the failure of the Justice Department, or specifically Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, to cooperate, to turn over documents that certain Republican members of Congress want from him. Fill us in quickly on that.
It's a complicated story. Very briefly, there's a paper fight between Congress and the Department of Justice over documents related to the Russia investigation and a few other investigations. But the cloud over all of it, Judy, is that they're trying to go after Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, who also oversees the Mueller probe. So as they fight over documents, it risks putting that Russia probe with Bob Mueller at risk if Rod Rosenstein's removed as the manager. There's a lot of political chess going on here, a lot of legal chess, and you got to read up on all of it, but that's what's happening.
So Rosenstein spoke before a group yesterday. We saw clips of it on television. It was reported that he essentially is saying, I'm going to do what I think the Justice Department should be doing, let this investigation go forward. He didn't sound as if he's prepared to turn those documents over.
He's not, and the Department of Justice said today, this is a big story, that they're not going to give Congress the document that shows the scope of the Mueller investigation, something that's come up in the Paul Manafort trial, and they're not going to give it over. And that has alarmed Trump-allied Republicans on Capitol Hill, like Mark Meadows, the North Carolina Republican House member who speaks regularly to President Trump. And they're warning of impeachment proceedings against Rosenstein if he does not comply. So we're at this tense moment between the DOJ and House GOP.
And what is the thinking, Bob Costa, if Rosenstein were removed?
It's a long way from there, Judy. Speaker Ryan, a Republican, could stop that kind of thing from happening on the House floor. Meadows still may try to do it through different House rules, but it would be an unprecedented moment to have a federal official who wasn't being accused of bribery, the usual kind of impeachment proceedings for a judge or someone like that, for a document fight to lead to impeachment. It would be, to say the least, historic.
Robert Costa of both Washington Week and The Washington Post. So much to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another deadline looms for the president, this one on May 12th. He must decide whether to continue waiving sanctions that had been imposed on Iran but were lifted as part of the 2015 nuclear deal. If they are put back in place, that would be a violation of the Obama administration-era agreement, which froze Iran's nuclear program. On Monday, one of the deal's harshest critics, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, alleged that documents stolen by Israel from Tehran show that Iran retains the blueprints for restarting its program. So where do we stand 10 days from this deadline? For some answers, we turn to former U.S. Secretary of Energy, Ernest Moniz. He was a key member of the American negotiating team that struck that deal. He's now CEO of the nonprofit Nuclear Threat Initiative. Ernest Moniz, welcome to the program. So you heard, you're very familiar with what the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to say, how he described all these documents, these computer disks that were taken from Iran. What do you make of all that?
Well, first of all, of course, we all knew that Iran had a weapons program. Our intelligence agencies declared that in 2007. The IAEA, the international inspectors, said they had a structured program. So there was no deception here in the sense of their having a program. And I might say just up front that we went into the negotiation, of course, knowing that. And last week, Secretary Mattis said, I read the agreement, and it sounds like an agreement made for a cheater. So, you know, this is not on trust. Now, what the Prime Minister put forward, of course, may have some additional information on people, on places, et cetera, and all of those must be run to the ground. And the JCPOA, the Iran agreement,
Which is the agreement.
the agreement puts in place the process to do that. So indeed, in my view, the Prime Minister's presentation provides more reason why we need, in fact, to stay in the Iran agreement.
So when the Prime Minister says this is just proof that the Iranians are going to be able to make a bomb once this deal expires, is he not accurate about
No,
it?
he is not, for a couple of reasons. First of all, you don't make bombs with papers and CDs, you make them with nuclear material, and the agreement did not, I might just say, did not just freeze the Iranian program, it rolled it back dramatically to the point where even if they went full out, no subterfuge whatsoever, it would take them at least a year just to assemble the nuclear material for a bomb. That's the first point. The second point may be even more consequential. After 15 years after the agreement, restrictions on Iran's peaceful nuclear activities go away. But we are not back to where we were before. Now we have the world's most intrusive verification regime, and that's really central. If you think about it, if Iran wanted a nuclear weapon, they're not going to do it in the open. They're going to do it covertly. The agreement is what gives the international inspectors the tools to go anywhere in Iran and have access.
And I wanted to ask you about this so-called sunset clause, which is what happens after the deal expires, in effect. Because the argument is by the critics that all bets are off and Iran can go right back to doing what it was doing before. Your point is that they won't be able to do
Correct.
that.
There is no sunset in the agreement. What does phase out in various steps, 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25 years, are various specific elements of what they can do. But what remains in place forever is first of all, their commitment to not have a nuclear weapon. Secondly, their forswearing weaponization activities. But most important, they must follow something called the additional protocol. Basically, what that means is the international inspectors can go to undeclared nuclear sites, and uniquely, Iran must provide access in a fixed time period.
Let me cite a comment that's been made in the last day or so by the former deputy head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. You know him very well, the IAEA. His name is Ali Honin, I think that's correct. He says some of the images the Israelis have show pieces of equipment directly related to nuclear weapons work that had not been previously disclosed. Is that your understanding?
So actually, the same gentleman also said upon seeing the presentation that he just saw a lot of pictures that he had seen before. So again, as I said, the full cache of information may certainly contain information on individuals, on equipment, on places that maybe we didn't know about before. But again, we knew they had a weapons program, number one. Number two, we need to run all of those elements he refers to into the ground. Iran frankly, is in a tough spot. They've got to explain all of this. And that's why we need the process that the agreement put in place with the IAEA, with something called the Joint Commission of the Negotiating Countries, and ultimately the UN Security Council.
Well, another point that Ali Honin is making, he said, what you're looking at here, he said, this is much more extensive than what was known before. He said, now it's clear that Iran has new locations that the IAEA definitely has not visited before. And he's going on to say a country party to this nuclear non-proliferation treaty should maintain all this because it violates the spirit of the treaty. In other words, he's saying there are just some very troubling pieces of information that come from what the Israelis turned up.
Again, I think the Iranians have to be put on the spot to explain why these archives were maintained after they, in the agreement, and the supreme leader said, we will never have a nuclear weapon.
What will the consequences be if President Trump goes ahead and says the U.S. is withdrawing from that nuclear deal?
I think it would be, frankly, tragic for a couple of reasons. One is it will take away the process that we need right now, in fact, to explore these, the information in the Israeli information. Two, it will drive a wedge between the United States and our allies in Europe. And it will be very, very messy because on the one hand, the European governments, UK, France, Germany, have all made it clear while Iran is in compliance, we should be working with them to keep them in compliance. At the same time, their own companies will be subject to sanctions from the United States. And this is a very, very poor...
These are private companies doing business with Iran.
Private companies doing business in Iran, exactly.
So I'm asking you because we just saw in Washington last week, President Macron of France, Chancellor Merkel of Germany were here both talking to the president. It seems that they are, I mean, it's been reported, they're working on some sort of fallback plan if the U.S. does pull out. So that's a possibility.
I think the president put forward a bunch of desires in terms of the European actions with the United States. Most of them, the Europeans, I think, are quite prepared to go with us on, and very importantly, and I think it was shown in the joint strikes in Syria with the UK and France, that they want to work with us in pushing back on Iran, but they don't want to violate the agreement.
Very, very quickly, totally different subject, well, similar subject, but a different part of the world, North Korea. You followed these nuclear developments around the world. Do you believe that the North Koreans may be ready to denuclearize as they are suggesting to some negotiators?
They may. They've made statements about having their deterrent complete and now focusing on the economy. I think we have to play it out. But it's the same as Iran. Don't trust and verify, verify, verify. And for North Korea, that will be, I might say, even a greater challenge, the verification, than it is with Iran.
Ernest Moniz, former U.S. Secretary of Energy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Coming up on the NewsHour, new revelations about the EPA administrator's questionable dealings with lobbyists, and an inside look at a website that churns out hyper-partisan content picked up on social media. But first, when someone is charged with a crime but cannot afford an attorney, the court is required to provide one. In most cases, that person is a so-called public defender. But what if that public defender already has too many clients to serve as competent representation? That's a situation playing out in many states, including Missouri, where public defenders have started refusing cases, throwing a wrench into the machinery of the criminal justice system. John Yang has this story, produced by Frank Carlson and with support from the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, and is part of our continuing coverage of broken justice.
In December, Rayshad Ashton was arrested in Platte County, Missouri, charged with resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. Unable to make bond, he'd already spent 4 months in jail when his public defender told him that his caseload was so heavy he wouldn't have time to take his case to trial for another 6 months.
Like, and from 6 months from now, I could have totally repaired all the damage that's been done from the 4 months that I've already been. You know, this is my life right here.
Ashton spoke to us from jail.
We shouldn't even be here. I mean, there's a room full of 40 guys right now who haven't been sentenced. They're all just waiting on the next thing to happen. It's just a waiting game. I'm just sitting here waiting.
The Sixth Amendment of the Constitution guarantees every American facing trial the right to a lawyer, even if they cannot afford one. The Supreme Court enshrined that right into law with its landmark 1963 ruling in the case Gideon versus Wainwright. One way society meets that responsibility is with public defenders. But across the country, that system is being stretched to the breaking point, underfunded and overworked.
We've created a counterfeit defense, and it's only the illusion of fairness.
The Public Defender's Office says it's at a tipping point and the outlook is not good.
We want the state to give them public defenders or to give money to appoint lawyers who can represent them in the way that the Constitution demands.
We are dealing with a crisis.
Missouri may well be ground zero, the state's public defender system widely seen as nearly broken. The state ranks 49th in per capita spending on indigent defense. Last year, its 320 public defenders handled 80,000 cases, on average more than 240 cases each. Listen to these lawyers in the public defender's office in Jackson County, the state's biggest district, which includes Kansas City.
Most days it's overwhelming.
Over the next 6 weeks, I have some very, very serious trials.
They deserve a lot more attention than I give them.
Mostly all the time.
I think I have 6 murder cases right now.
It's too many for me to be prepared for.
Pretty much if you ask any lawyer in this office, they'd say the same thing.
Do you feel you're able to give them all the time they deserve?
I don't know if this is a long answer that you're asking for here. No, is the simple answer.
Michael Barrett is head of Missouri's public defender system.
Defendants routinely sit in jail for weeks just before they meet their attorney. And we tell them that we are very eager to work on your case, but it's going to be a while because there's an awful lot of people in front of you.
In 2016, Barrett convinced the Republican-controlled legislature to spend more money for his office. And when then Governor Jay Nixon, a Democrat, slashed that increase, Barrett took a bold step.
I wanted to bring attention to this matter because so many people are being incarcerated without competent representation. But before I appointed a private lawyer who didn't cause this problem, I thought I'd start with the one person with a law license in the state who could do something to fix it.
A bitter budget battle in Missouri going to a new level last week.
Missouri Governor Jay Nixon has just been recruited to be a state public defender.
Missouri's lead public defender has ordered Missouri Governor Jay Nixon to represent a poor defendant in court later this month.
The court said Barrett didn't have the power to do that, but he had made his point. Now the courts are considering a $20 million class action suit the American Civil Liberties Union filed against the state. The 5 plaintiffs, all represented in criminal court by public defenders, say their constitutional rights were violated by long delays. Barrett acknowledges that when defenders are handling as many as 200 cases at a time, there's no way they can fulfill their professional and ethical duties to their clients.
You have to go visit with your client. You have to look at the charges that your client faces. You have to investigate the case. You have to meet with witnesses. You have to talk to the police officer. You have to file motions. You have to receive the evidence that the prosecution has and then discuss the evidence with your client. To think that you can do each one of those steps in 150 cases is absolutely ridiculous.
As a result, defendants like Rayshad Ashton often end up pleading guilty to crimes they say they didn't commit just to get out of jail. It's called pleading to daylight.
I was in jail 4 months already, and by the time they came with the deal that was SIS probation, I just took it, pretty much knowing I was not guilty of the charges that were being brought about.
After resolving those charges with his probation plea, Ashton remains detained, waiting for his public defender to help him address other charges.
The issue of overworked public defenders in Missouri has been building for years. Now it's come to a head. Last summer, the Missouri Supreme Court sent shockwaves through the system by sanctioning a public defender for neglecting clients.
David Wiegert has been a public defender in Jackson County for 6 years.
I thought that this whole thing is a ticking time bomb for all of us. It is probably due to our clients' inexperience with the system that they don't know how to file proper bar complaints against us. That allows us to keep going with the system in which we don't give them proper service. But if they were ever made aware of the ways in which they can file formal ethical complaints against us, I think that the gates are open at that point, and I think we drop like flies.
On the day we visited, 16-year defender Laura O'Sullivan was heading to court to tell a judge that, given her workload and ethical responsibilities, she couldn't take on another client.
What's the judge's reaction? How do they react to that?
Most of the time they're denying our request to decline the cases. I think they don't know what to do.
That's because judges themselves are graded on how quickly they move cases, putting public defenders and sitting judges at odds.
Some judges and prosecutors say the problem with Missouri public defenders' offices isn't too little money or too few people. They say it's too much mismanagement.
You have to do more with less.
Dwight Scroggins served as a public defender before becoming the prosecuting attorney in Buchanan County, north of Kansas City, 28 years ago. He puts the blame for delays on the defenders themselves.
The public defender's thinking is limited to, we have a lot of cases, we need more money, we need more attorneys. And guess what? They've gotten, over the years, more money and more attorneys, and what are they saying? You have to start looking somewhere along the line at efficiencies.
While it's true that since 1994, funding for the State Public Defender's Office has continued to grow, so has the number of cases the office handles. Which leads to the question, how many cases are too many?
Missouri is the epicenter of this whole movement to end this abandonment of the rule of law.
Stephen Hanlon is a longtime pro bono attorney who serves as counsel to the National Association for Public Defense. Its members include 16,000 public defenders. By auditing the work of both public and private defense attorneys in Missouri and 3 other states, he's developed a standard for how many hours should be spent on a case. The results are striking.
They're handling 3 to 5 times as many cases as they can handle competently. If an obstetrician has 3 to 5 times as many cases as he or she can handle competently, terrible things happen. If a public defender with people's liberty at stake has 3 to 5 times as many cases as he or she can handle competently, terrible things will happen.
He hopes his data will eventually lead to reforms in what he sees as the systematic, unconstitutional, and racist underfunding of indigent defense across the nation.
You cannot do mass incarceration unless the whole justice system rolls over and plays dead.
In the meantime, defendants like Rayshad Ashton wait for their day in court.
We're your sons, and we are your cousins, and then there's a whole bunch of pods over there that are your daughters and moms. I don't understand how this is continuing to be the case, like over and over again.
An all too common refrain for those who must rely on public defenders to represent them in court. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm John Yang in Kansas City.
The administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt, has been under heavy scrutiny for some of the ways he has spent money on travel, security, and pay raises for his staff. He's now facing at least 11 investigations related to a variety of such charges. Now, as William Brangham tells us, Pruitt is in the spotlight yet again, this time over a trip to Morocco.
The Washington Post and others reported that Pruitt's trip to North Africa last December was arranged in part by his longtime friend, former Comcast lobbyist Richard Smotkin. A few months after the trip, according to the Post, Smotkin was awarded a 1-year, $40,000 a month contract with the Moroccan government. Federal laws prohibit public officials from using government resources to financially benefit their friends, but the EPA has insisted this trip was proper and that Smotkin didn't attend any official meetings and that Administrator Pruitt did not fully know about Smotkin's ties to the Moroccan government. The purpose of this trip has also been publicly questioned by some lawmakers, and so was its cost, which reportedly topped $100,000. Juliette Alprin of The Washington Post helped break this most recent story about Scott Pruitt, and she joins me once again. Welcome.
Hello.
What else can you tell us about this trip to Morocco and the questions about it?
So there are a lot of interesting aspects of this trip, but I would start with the fact that, first of all, many people, as you noted, questioned why the administrator was going there. It is true that he did spend part of his time working on a bilateral environmental chapter of a trade agreement between Morocco and the U.S. However, according to the reporting that we've done, he was very focused on the issue of natural gas exports from the United States to Morocco. That's what he focused on in the run-up to the trip and also while he was there. And again, much of this trip was arranged by Richard Smotkin. So this is a friend of his who has worked as lobbyist in different capacities, and both some of the information we got today as well as yesterday shows that he was intimately involved in essentially serving as a liaison between the Moroccan government and Pruitt's top aides, both as they were trying to decide what he would do, and once they arrived in Morocco, he joined them. He was a constant presence, whether it was in social events as well as some of the official meetings on the itinerary.
So the question about this, I guess, would be that Smotkin helps arrange the trip and in some way helps get Pruitt to Morocco. And then a few months later, Smotkin gets this very lucrative contract. That seems to be the ethical question here?
Yes, that's the most pressing ethical question that's raised on this. Interestingly, he registered as a foreign agent last month, and that's when the contract was signed, but it was retroactive to January 1st, so 2 weeks after they returned to the United States. And the liaison that he worked with in the run-up to the trip, who was on there, is the person who ultimately gave him the contract.
Shifting gears a little bit, two of Scott Pruitt's top aides recently resigned. Tell us about who those men were and the timing of this.
Yeah, just this week, two of Pruitt's top aides are formally leaving the EPA. That includes Albert Kelly, who is one of his top aides who oversaw the Superfund program and the initiative that Mr. Pruitt's been pursuing, which he's been very focused on, and Pasquale Nino Parada, who is the head of Mr. Pruitt's security detail. Both of them were top advisors to the administrator who weighed in both on the issues which they were in charge of, as well as other issues, hiring issues, strategy, and things like that. And so what we're seeing is that Mr. Parada today was scheduled to meet with House investigators and has come under great scrutiny for some of the recommendations he made, which led to, say, Mr. Pruitt's first-class travel and other activities. And then Mr. Kelly, who by all accounts had taken a serious role and policy-oriented role at the department, is under scrutiny for some of his financial dealings back in Oklahoma.
As we said initially, Scott Pruitt is under 11 different investigations, and many have wondered why he's still on this job, but obviously the president still has full faith in him. And many have pointed out that this is probably because he has been so tenacious in undoing President Obama's environmental regulations. One of them has been lowering, apparently, the fuel emission standards for automobiles. This was a big part of the Obama legacy and something that Scott Pruitt has been rolling back on. Just this week, California and 16 other states have said that they are going to file suit to try to block the EPA from lowering those national standards. From an automaker perspective, if you're wondering, you're looking at California and these states arguing this and the EPA arguing something else, that's got to cause a lot of confusion for the industry.
Absolutely. It's a difficult time for automakers who are trying to decide what sort of car should they manufacture just a few years from now. We're talking about model year 2022, which obviously goes on sale in 2021. So what's happening is that they are, on one level, they did initially ask the Trump administration to potentially roll back these standards, but now, given that California and the states allied with it compose roughly a third of the nation's auto market, they're trying to figure out what kind of cars they'll be producing and for whom, and that certainly makes these decisions difficult.
Juliet Alperin, thanks so much, as always, to help us wade through all this.
You're welcome.
Now to our deep dive on the continuing problem of false or misleading news, or what you might call junk news. Much of the attention recently has centered on Facebook, and yesterday the company's founder and CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, told Wired magazine that it may take up to 3 years to fully prevent all kinds of harmful content from affecting people's news feeds. Tonight, Miles O'Brien's latest report profiles a man who has been a leading purveyor purveyor of junk news and how he has been exploiting Facebook to reach an audience. It's part of our weekly series on the leading edge of technology.
There has been a shooting at a high school in Parkland.
Right now we have about 5,300 people and change on the website.
It was a busy day at the office when we met one of the internet's most prolific distributors of hyper-partisan fare.
Actually, in a story like this, we do actually beat the mainstream media for these types of breaking news events.
It was the day of the high school shootings in Parkland, Florida. And as the horrific events unfolded, Cyrus Masumi was spinning facts reported by others to fit the worldview of his audience.
You can see that, like, he's wearing a Make America Great Again hat.
Right.
And he has lots of photos of guns, so obviously this is going to be a very controversial issue.
His site is called Truth Examiner, and it caters to liberals with headlines like this designed to entice clicks on stories with little substance. His writers are among the 5 most successful at luring those clicks on Facebook.
People want to read those lines to reaffirm their beliefs, right?
Correct.
And that is not rocket science, is it?
It's not rocket science, but doing it faster and better than your competitors is an art.
Lately, Truth Examiner has added something else to the formula, a steady stream of conspiracy theories, ironically accusing the Trump administration of peddling fake news. Masumi has thrived in this murky world for 8 years, hedging his bets, serving up grist for liberals and conservatives through various Facebook pages.
They want like 250-word, like little hit 'em and go. It's like basically like a coke addict. Every hour, he just needs to, like, get that little dopamine rush. Like a fan on the conservative side or the liberal side needs to take out their phone, look at it. Oh, Trump sucks. Trump sucks so bad. All right, I'm done. And then, right? Like, that's it. That's it.
People don't care about the facts.
Yeah, of course. People don't care about facts. Take it to the bank.
He estimates he has spent over $1 million in ads, reaching over 100 million people, and has made several $1 million by selling that audience to advertisers on his own site and on Facebook.
Do you create fake news?
No, I don't.
Tell me what it is then.
Always inflammatory, like excluding facts from the other side, but never fake. My team, they don't cover news angles which are favorable to opposition in the same way that CNN would never cover a favorable angle to Trump or MSNBC.
He lives in the home where he grew up, on a 9-acre vineyard in Napa, California.
We grow a brand of Cabernet, which is, I'm told, very nice, although I'm not a wine person.
He is a self-described cultural libertarian, free thinker, and lover of politics. For him, it all started in high school. He was selling anti-Obama t-shirts and decided Facebook was a good way to reach more customers. It worked. He learned how to build an audience on Facebook, dropped the t-shirts, and created Mr. Conservative, his first hyper-partisan site.
So I'm a marketer with a love of politics. And, I contend that, like, marketers will be the king of the future of media. I think that the danger is not the Russians or the Macedonians, but that the actual danger is when you have a marketer who doesn't love politics.
Producer Cameron Hickey found Cyrus Masumi during our 16-month investigation of hyper-partisan misinformation on Facebook. Cameron's key reporting tool, software that he wrote that analyzes social media, looking for the sources of what we call junk news.
It's clear that a lot of the publishers are domestic, and I think we've given a lot of attention to Russian disinformation or Macedonian teenage profiteers, but both of those groups, I think, learned it from these guys. They learned it from Americans who have been long profiting on partisan information or other kinds of junk.
Social networking allows us all to bypass the traditional arbiters of truth that evolved in the 20th century.
Historically, our information landscape has been tribal. We turn to the people that are like us, the people that we know, the people around us, to make sense of what is real and what we believe in.
Computer scientist Dana Boyd is president and founder of Data and Society.
And what we're seeing now with a networked media landscape is the ability to move back towards extreme tribalism. And there are a whole variety of actors, state actors, non-state actors, who are happy to move along a path where people are actually not putting their faith in institutions or information intermediaries, and are instead turning to their tribes, to their communities.
Cyrus Masumi's first big jackpot exploiting this trend toward tribalism was linked to yet another mass shooting at a school, this one in Sandy Hook, Connecticut in 2012. In the midst of that horror, he bought a Facebook ad that asked the question, "Do you stand against the assault weapons ban? If so, click like." Those who did became subscribers to his page, ensuring his content would rise to the top of their news feeds. He had bought thousands of fans at a very low price.
I felt subsequently that I built my first business, sort of, if you want to call it, on the graves of young children who were killed.
Well, how do you feel about that?
I don't know, how do people feel about things that they do badly? I feel bad about it, but I mean, we do what we do to pay the mortgage, right?
The strategy Masumi helped pioneer spread like virtual wildfire. By 2016, marketers, political operatives, and state actors were all using the same playbook of hyped headlines, political propaganda, and outright falsehoods.
They were all in an environment together, a melting pot, if you will, and with a whole set of really powerful skills when they saw a reality TV star start to run for president. And that's pretty funny. That's pretty interesting. And so it was fun to create spectacle.
The stage was set for the 2016 presidential election, and an unprecedented misinformation campaign waged on several fronts. Back in Napa, Cyrus Masumi was doing well, running a conservative page called Truth Monitor, along with the liberal Truth Examiner. Masumi says anger is what generates likes, and conservative stories were more lucrative.
Conservatives are angrier people.
Tell me about that.
You ever seen a Trump rally on TV?
Yes.
Yeah? It's gold.
But since the election, the conservative side of Masumi's business has dried up. His site that used to offer that content has moved into feel-good stories. He says competition among conservative, hyper-partisan sites created a junk news arms race, making the content too extreme to be ranked favorably by the Facebook newsfeed algorithm.
On the conservative side, I think that we were at one point publishing low-quality clickbait. That's what the conservative side devolved into.
Is it unpatriotic to do it?
To publish low-quality clickbait? I think that people like what they like. And my goal at one point was to deliver to them what they like. And unfortunately, the reality of that is that people are prone to go for the lowest common denominator.
But for Cyrus Masumi, the target really doesn't matter, so long as he hits the mark. Stirring up anger, no matter on which side, is very good for business. Ahead, as we continue our series, you'll meet two of the fans bought by Cyrus Masumi, a deep blue liberal from Brooklyn and a Christian conservative from Indianapolis. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Miles O'Brien in Napa, California.
Miles' series on Facebook and Junk News continues next week. You can watch part 1 and find more reporting on our website, pbs.org/newshour. Now to our NewsHour shares, something that caught our eye that might be of interest to you too. Workers at a construction site just miles from the nation's capital recently unearthed some long-forgotten treasures dating back to our nation's founding. Our Julia Griffin explains.
In Old Town Alexandria these days, the pulse of progress means helmets, backhoes, and 18th century ships.
Behind us is construction in progress, but also archaeology in progress.
Eleanor Breen is acting city archaeologist for historic Alexandria. When developers want to dig on culturally significant land in the city, her team ensures archaeologists are on hand to identify and help preserve any discovered historical artifacts.
With a lot of scrapes of the trowel and scoops of the shovel, there's history unearthed. But what's being found here is really particularly remarkable.
Remarkable because in addition to old building foundations and paved alleyways, the archaeologists at this site discovered not one, but 3 ships from the 1700s hidden in the dirt. But the 12 to 25 foot wide hulls are not long forgotten shipwrecks.
It was actually a fairly common practice going back centuries to take derelict ships and chop them up and actually use large fragments of the hull as part of the framework to fill in ground and make new land that didn't exist before.
This map, drawn by a young George Washington, shows Alexandria's natural shoreline with its shallow mudflats in 1748. By the early 1800s, Alexandrians added 10 new city blocks to the waterfront that continue to exist today.
To be a premier port city, they needed to get more land closer to that deeper channel of the Potomac River. It was much easier to get the cargo off of the ships if you can bring the land to the ship as opposed to smaller ships to the land.
Today, the trio of unearthed ships, likely cargo vessels, sit just south of what had been Point Lumley. Now exposed, their once waterlogged timbers must be kept moist at all times to prevent warping and degradation. Archaeologists are now removing the hulls piece by piece and storing them in tanks of water, just as they did with another Revolutionary War-era ship found a block away in 2015. That ship is now at Texas A&M, undergoing a years-long conservation process to prepare the fragile beams for study and display. Where the new ships end up has yet to be determined, but for Breen, the painstaking measures to preserve them are well worth the effort.
I think there's something in our culture about the seafaring days of discovery that captures people's attention when they see such large fragments of vessels in the ground.
City officials hope all the ships could one day be put on exhibit for modern-day Alexandrians to enjoy. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Julia Griffin in Alexandria, Virginia.
History everywhere we look. And on the NewsHour online, right now, a NewsHour reporter spends a week consuming news only from Radio Sputnik. That's a Russian government-funded outlet, widely seen by experts as a vehicle to disseminate disinformation for the Kremlin. That and more is on our website, pbs.org/newshour. And that's the NewsHour for tonight. On Thursday, the assault on intelligence. We talk with former CIA Director Michael Hayden about the agency under the Trump presidency. I'm Judy Woodruff. Join us online and again here tomorrow evening. For all of us at the PBS NewsHour, thank you, and we'll see you soon.
You're watching PBS.